the work of an Iowa-based organization, Bailing Out Benji, kind of helped spark this investigation. Can you tell me about that?
That resolution filed in King County Superior Court requires the company to pay the state $3.75 million with interest.
Bailing Out Benji regularly looks through these records of dogs' movement from state to state.
Bailing Out Benji
played a key part in unraveling a nationwide puppy scheme.
Bailing Out Benji,
an organization that's been working across the country to stop the pipeline of puppy mill breeders.
Bailing Out Benji.
I will use my voice because they don't have one, and I will keep doing it until there are no more puppy mill dogs. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to this week's episode of Truth, Lies, and Puppy Mills. I'm Mindy Callison, and I'm here with Kristen Petty, and we are going to kind of do a recap, review, look back, something about the Daniel Gingerich puppy mill case in Iowa. This is kind of something that was big for it into a licensed legal puppy mill that has horrendous violations. Inspectors were walking by and documenting it, and we were just screaming out into the world, like, help us help these dogs. It was a very wild case, but it put us into the faces of a lot of other people. Like, people finally realized what Bailing Out Benji does and who we are because of our work on this case, because we chased the media and we kept it in the public conversation until the animals could be saved. So
excellent. I listened to our Steve Cruzy episode this morning a little bit, and then you had sent me some articles from the time of fighting the Daniel Gingerich case. So I have to say, like, usually when we do podcasts, I'm like really excited, and I am not excited for this conversation. I'm kind of like dreading it because it's so frustrating to me. It's so, anyway.
Yeah, this is just
the
kind
justice part of me just like screams when I keep reading all of the reports and all of the slaps on the wrist. And
yeah, so for anyone who doesn't quite know what we're talking about, I'll give you a quick overview. Daniel Gingerich was a USDA licensed dog breeder in southern Iowa, and he had, I don't know if we'll ever know exactly how many dogs he had. He ended up having at least 13 different locations that the government found out about after the fact. Thousands of dogs and puppies were in his circuit, in his breeding operations, I guess.
Does each location have to have a license, or he's licensed as a breeder and can have as many locations around a state? Or
so that's kind of what we've learned about the USDA, and it's really weird. So like a breeder could have one address that is their main address with the dog count, and then on every inspection report afterwards it'll say what is it? It's like location 2. Okay. Location 3. Okay. And so you can have more locations under one license, whether that's different properties or different buildings on different properties. That's all really internal information that the USDA keeps. And so we kind of find things out after the fact, which is why it's really important the way we keep our data. So when we're tracking addresses and we're tracking things like that, we can mark when someone's an unlicensed breeder, and we can mark that we filed a complaint on them. Well, then a few months, weeks, whatever later, we find out, oh, that person's actually an employee of this different breeding operation. So no, when we filed a complaint that they were unlicensed and illegal, the government's going to like wash off that complaint. They're going to ignore it because they know behind the scenes that they're connected to an actual licensee. I don't think that should be the case. I think every facility should have their own license number and their own inspection, just for transparency and for animal welfare in general. Right. That's a weird part of how the USDA operates. Yeah. Okay. So, as you know, Bailing Out Benji looks at these inspection records weekly, daily. Alexis and I are always in the USDA's website in the search engine. And we started noticing this breeder in Iowa getting dozens of violations at an inspection. And then 3 weeks later, dozens more. Why? We're watching this. We're seeing like these violations weren't just like, oh, he didn't sign his paperwork or he didn't have the vet work handy for the inspector to see. These were dead dogs on the property. These were emaciated dogs on the property. As this case is unfolding, we are doing FOIA requests. We're trying to get as much information as possible. We're getting videos from the USDA as an inspector or someone is walking by and a clearly emaciated golden retriever. This dog is hours away from dying, and the dog did end up having to be euthanized. But month after month, we're seeing her in these reports. And then we get a USDA video where someone is saying, haha, you're lucky the ARL isn't with us today, because they would have taken that dog. And it's like, anyone seeing that dog should have taken that dog, right? And so this is what we were facing. We're reading these reports. No one is helping us. Ashley and Nicole and I were reporting about this on our first podcast. We're doing posts. We're trying to file complaints. Finally, what ended up getting us in the news, getting the story in the news, was Clark Kaufman from the Iowa Capitol Dispatch. He did phenomenal work covering a previous case. It was a horrific zoo here in Iowa, like a backyard zoo, and also similar, lots of USDA violations. No one could save the animals and shut them down. A lawsuit ensued. He followed that whole case. And so I knew that he at least knew enough about this to be able to cover it in a meaningful way. And I think that is a very missing piece in a lot of journalism these days, is you get news agencies that will put out a press release because someone sent them a press release. They didn't do any deep thinking beyond that press release. And so sometimes we see a lot of fake news, fake facts out there. But in this case, we pulled Clark Kaufman in. I spent time kind of giving him the background of the case. And then he was like, okay, thanks for your work. He ignored me. I went off onto my own, and he started covering the case. And as it started ensuing, I don't want to jump the gun, but yeah, Daniel had 220 USDA violations in a 10-month period. Direct violations, critical violations, like the gambit. At one point, he got a temporary suspension. He was not allowed to sell puppies. That's kind of what the suspension means. But they did give him the ability to sell dogs at an auction. And so as I'm handling this case, there are rescues in Missouri who are going to a dog auction that I didn't know was happening, because none of that is in the inspection reports. They're not saying Daniel's going to sell his dog on dogs on these days. But there are rescues who go to Missouri dog auctions regularly, and they went and they're buying a bunch of his dogs. One of those dogs was Eleanor, a golden retriever, and I wasn't there, so I can't really say, but apparently they had said that she's pregnant again, like at the dog auction, and the rescue was looking at the dates and they're like, well, that's weird. She was last whelped like 2 months ago. She shouldn't be pregnant now. And so Eleanor looked really sick, shaky, and they bought her. Turns out she had pyometra, which we can get into later, because a lot of dogs were purchased at that dog auction, whether or not you're okay with that. But he was able to sell his dogs in that way while still having thousands back home. And so as this case is being uncovered, as the media is kind of digging into it a little more, we're finding more and more of these facilities popping up. And we're seeing that he's got dozens, if not hundreds of dogs just hidden in the state of Iowa.
And the USDA, when they do a suspension and say you cannot sell puppies, they're only enforcing the locations they know about. So if he's got some hidden in other locations, he's business as usual over there, because they're not inspecting those. They don't know about those.
I mean, anyone can sell a dog, right? And so that's the silly thing about these suspensions. Like even when we mentioned like Steve Kruse having that suspension, he went to a dog auction and sold his dogs. Like, we know that for a fact. He said it wasn't him. He got away with it. And then we all move on with our day, because that's the nature of this world, unfortunately. And so, it's all very, very interesting how they handle it internally. But I do want to say, like, this is something that in the moment, as I'm reading the inspection records, a name popped up, and it was Will Yoder. And in the inspection record, there's actually a deposition from the USDA inspector. So I was reading this like in the court documents. Will Yoder found an unlicensed facility with like 100+ dogs on it. And he contacted the Department of Ag, and he was like, hey, I know where he is hiding dogs. And this is a really important part of the story that we couldn't tell at the time because we didn't know it. A lot of the information we got after the fact is because we got it after the fact. But Will, being a dog broker in his community, he is one of the leaders in the Amish community in southern Iowa, when he was hearing about what was going on, he was reporting it to the state of Iowa. And that's not something we talk a lot about because it's yucky. Groups like ours typically don't want to thank breeders. We don't want to thank brokers for their role in these positive parts of the story. But that was like a big part. Like he was trying in his community to make some kind of impact.
Yeah. Yeah. We need it to be us versus them. And when them starts doing something admirable, it's hard to acknowledge that. So Daniel's got far too many dogs, far too many violations, suspensions, slaps on the wrist, don't do much to rectify it.
Right.
We have a broker filing complaints.
Mm-hmm.
Did anything come?
Yeah, so we are all screaming at the USDA, do your job, take these animals. What is happening? If you're walking by and documenting dead dogs and documenting dogs starving to death, why have you not taken steps to get those dogs removed? And so the Department of Justice gets involved. And that's kind of an interesting part of this. The federal Department of Justice is getting involved. And that's not typically something we see in these cases. For a case to go all the way up to a federal court is pretty interesting. But that's kind of how this started going. We were also, it's very important to note, and this is something that I will keep talking about because it annoys me. What Alexis and I do, she wasn't with us at the time, but we're trying to get charges pressed on the county level. So on top of going to the state of Iowa and going to the USDA, we go to the sheriff. And this sheriff in the news is going, well, he's just a kid. He's not that bad. And he's like defending this behavior while painting me to be a crazy animal activist who just wants everybody in trouble. And so this man and I, in the public arena, we're kind of low-key battling in news reports because he didn't want to press charges. Well, after the Department of Justice got involved, I was going to federal court. The really interesting thing is in federal court, there are no cameras. There's no live streaming. People who follow court cases kind of know that. You can see a lot of things, like you can go on YouTube any given day of the week and watch a court case, not federal court. And so I had to go in with a pen and paper and just take handwritten notes. And Clark Kaufman is in the pew two away from me, and he's taking notes. And then we're both reporting on this at the same time. And we're finding these little things like I mentioned in the Steve Cruzy episode. Daniel owed $600,000 to the bank and to Steve Cruzy because he just kept getting more dogs, and he didn't know what to do with them. And that's kind of why I said when you have bad mentors around you, you are likely going to make bad choices, because in these documents we could see that Daniel would take dogs to someone, and then when the mom was almost ready to give birth, he would take the mom back and take her to another location where she would give birth, and then they would take the pregnant or the no longer pregnant mom back to the facility, which is exactly what Steve Cruzy does. Yeah. And so when you start seeing these parallels, you start seeing how someone who is so prolific and well known for being cruel is now kind of teaching those bad practices to other people in his community. Yeah. So back to your question, what happened? Court case, everything goes through. Daniel agrees to surrender the remaining dogs. And at this time, I will say, like, he had already auctioned off 300. The ARL, because of the court, had been able to take dozens of dogs here and there. I don't know the exact numbers, but basically every time an inspector would go in, once the Department of Justice was involved, an inspector would go in, dogs would be suffering. If they were at risk of dying, the ARL could take them and start performing care, because the goal was to remove all of them. So they were getting little amounts of dogs like throughout the month of October 2021. And then finally at the end, by November, all of the dogs that we knew of were removed from Daniel's property. And so he got a $60,000 fine, which ended up being slashed. He had to serve 30 days in jail. He could serve it in Iowa or in Ohio, and because his dad lived in Ohio and he was moving back. And he could serve it on the weekends at his leisure, so he could come and go from jail. And I think there was something else, 2-year probation.
Okay. And probation meant he couldn't breed dogs for 2 years, or they were just going to watch him closer? I think it's like he couldn't own dogs. I'm not quite sure. The state of Iowa gave him a suspension. He can't breed dogs in our state for a few years. Okay. And the USDA revoked his license, and he can't breed on the USDA level, but he is allowed to breed on the state level in any other state. Okay. Just not I thought
conducting USDA business.
in one of the articles that you sent, I thought I read, and it's kind of hazy, that something about he couldn't do anything that would be under the animal welfare provisions.
Animal Welfare Act.
Yeah.
Which
so,
is USDA.
okay.
So that means.
But that was just temporary. That wasn't permanent. Because that to me sounds like if you can't do anything that's subject to that, like you cannot breed dogs, you cannot have dogs, you cannot.
Well, but breeding is different than selling. So like the USDA, the different licensing, if he is not breeding to sell to a pet store or to sell to a broker, he doesn't need a USDA license.
But wouldn't he still be governed by the Animal Welfare Act? Aren't we all?
No. The Animal Welfare Act is specific to USDA licensees. Yes. So if he's in Ohio and he's a dog breeder, which we have I want to say that we have no evidence that he's breeding dogs. Okay. And please don't send us any information on Daniel Gingerich. There are 500 Daniel Gingeriches that we know about that breed dogs, which is a little bit of an exaggeration. But there are.
But makes it harder.
Name, right. It's a common name like John Smith. So when we are tracking these breeders, we're tracking addresses, we're tracking middle names, we know what we're doing. But when this case was happening, people from all over the country were like, he's moved to Pennsylvania, here's a Daniel Gingerich, and he's moved here, and it's just like, nope, not him, but thank you so much.
Yeah.
So
but a good example of how hard this work is to make sure that we are tracking the right people and the right connections so that we're not making false assumptions that somebody's doing something when it's actually someone else.
Right.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so this is something too, we're not an adoption agency. We didn't take any of the dogs. I did wind up with Eleanor. I adopted her from a rescue. She was very sick and left this earth way too soon because of poor genetics. Thankfully, she had the best remaining years of her life and didn't want for anything and was known by millions.
And enjoyed every second of it. She lived her retirement to a T.
Right. But she definitely deserved a longer life. And that's when we're talking about puppy mills, that's a huge part of it. The breeders that aren't genetic testing and they're not giving the dogs the life of a dog while you're still subjecting that dog to breeding is horrific. There are breeding facilities that have dogs that let them be dogs and they're running in yards and playing with toys, and that wasn't Eleanor's existence.
Right.
That wasn't any of those dogs' existence at Daniel Gingerich's place. So it's just a really interesting, and the reason we want to talk about it is we are coming up on the 4-year anniversary of all of those dogs being seized, and we've learned a lot of lessons since then because we are not a monolith in this. We're not in we are in a silo technically, but we're not always working alone in these animal welfare situations, and we don't talk about it too often. So, but yeah, feel free to interrupt me. I'm going to ramble a lot. I'm sure
this is
episode.
Good. This is. I don't have a ton of questions that can be answered.
Yeah,
I have a lot of questions, but they're questions that you're just going to look at me and be like, yeah. Yeah. So my cynical question then is, so as a result of this, we're seeing more violations. To what end? So we have more violations. Okay. Did that lead to any more consequence?
Right. And so
or it's just more violations.
That's kind of the thing. What does consequence look like? What does that mean to me? What does it mean to you? What does it mean to the national groups?
Here's my perception just from these 2 episodes. If I'm a breeder, I'm licensed, I get inspected, I have violations. Okay, that's a piece of paper. I keep doing what I'm doing.
Right.
I'm rechecked, I still have violations. Okay. I'm failing to see the consequence.
There are a lot of consequences behind the scenes that you and I will never necessarily see. Alexis and I kind of see them through some actions. We call them actions on the USDA website. Every once in a while, you'll see a breeder did get a fine, $5,000 fine, $2,000 fine.
And we see that in these cases, you have to surrender some dogs, you have to pay a fine, you have to serve some time, you have to, but you're still able to just do it again.
Yeah.
And that to me feels unprecedented. That to me, in most other spaces, if you are misbehaving is a weird word, but if you're not in compliance, you don't get to keep doing it. Maybe I'm wrong.
So
maybe I need to think
I'm going to
about
give
that
a
thought
little more
longer.
context to that because inspections are just one piece of what we're seeing. So without going in with the inspector, when we're seeing one thing, and of course we're talking about Daniel Gingerich, so hundreds of violations,
Right.
but when we're seeing one violation on a piece of paper, it's hard to have context around that. But I'll say Clark Kaufman was inspired by our quarterly reports that we put out every few months, that now he does them for restaurants. And he does them for nursing homes. And these are specific to Iowa. But every quarter you can go and you can read how horrific restaurants in our state are, or how horrific the nursing home situation in our state is. People are dying in nursing homes in our state, and those nursing homes aren't getting shut down either. So like,
that's a great analogy because I used to work in that space and it's not so different.
So I just wanted, I'm not like defending the actions of Daniel Gingerich or cases like that snowball. I just think that our culture is quick to fine and penalize and feel good, and then we move on. So if you're a Steve Kruse character and you're facing $10,000 in fines, cool, that's like 4 puppies. Move on.
Right.
And that's why we have a hard time with some of these laws that get passed that I don't see as meaningful. So California, we've already kind of talked a lot about it. Recently, the Senate and the House passed a bill to ban puppy brokers coming into California and to ban like all of these things. And I was like, okay, well, there's no fine attached. Okay, who's going to monitor the online website to make sure they're not selling into California? Okay, who's going to make sure the person in Missouri isn't a broker? They're just a breeder. Like, okay, who is always my question.
Right.
And so these bills that get passed, they're always like, they are feel-good bills.
Yeah.
Everyone is so mad about what's happening in Illinois right now with the stores that are quote unquote breaking the law. If they have to pay a $500 fine per puppy, I don't know. That's not what they're paying. But in general, it's a fine. It's a cost of doing business. And so I think people kind of forget that.
Yeah.
Like when you're already profiting and making money, fines are only impactful on poor people. Like laws are only impactful. I'm going to go on a whole different rant now, but like speeding. If I'm going to speed, I'm going to get a $100 ticket and I'm still going to speed because I can pay the ticket. If I can't pay the ticket, I'm not going to speed.
Yeah.
So fines only matter to an extent, and that's why this can be so frustrating because it seems like some of these worst actors have a constant supply of puppies that they can charge whatever they want for and get as much money as they need to pay those fines, but they're not putting that money back into the care of the breeding dogs, and that's what we are demanding. So anyway, it's all interesting.
Yeah.
But so earlier this year, Alexis and I went down to Bloomfield, Iowa, and we spent a day with Will Yoder and a few of the Amish breeders in that community. And this is a part of our field research. We've done this in Iowa, in Indiana, and in Missouri so far. And we're just really trying to get to know the different players. We're trying to figure out what these inspection records look like in person. Hearing what the inspectors do, all of that has been just phenomenal for us to know and be a part of. But I was able to talk to Will. Everyone knows like this Daniel Gingerich case was like my heart case. Even before Eleanor came into the picture, it was like this is my why. None of this makes sense. If we have laws, why? But talking with him about this, I was able to see like a different side of it. And Will and his veterinarian at one point, they knew that like 150 dogs were going to have to get moved. They weren't doing so hot. They were getting ready to build an emergency shelter. All of these Amish family members were going to get together and build an emergency shelter to help these dogs.
The dogs that were on Daniel Gingerich's property.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. The vet that works with Will was going to help and do the vet work on this. Like there was a whole community of people that wanted to help in their community, in their backyard. And I'm here in Ames, Iowa, screaming that you can't trust them because they're puppy mill owners and the dogs are going to be sorted back into the puppy mill industry and stuff. And so like, it's one of those learning lessons where I know we could have saved more lives earlier if I had the connections I do now and the relationships I do now, because that whole time he could have been helping to remove dogs. The state of Iowa might have allowed Will to start removing dogs, to relieve dogs. Daniel Gingerich might have trusted him more to remove dogs earlier. And then here is Mindy Callison in the way, bull in a china shop, right? And I don't regret how we handled that case, because we needed to get it in the media. This was going to be swept under the rug like everything else was. But it is that interesting piece of maybe expand who your allies are. Think about different people in this space who can help, because my God, Will could have probably saved a lot more dogs early on than we could have at the end.
Yeah, we talked earlier about deciding who can and can't help a problem we're trying to fix. And we sometimes get that narrow focus of like, we know what's best, we know how it should be done, and there's no room for anything outside of those boundaries. And trying to grow into opening that vision a little bit wider to say, okay, this isn't what I would choose, but I can see how this would be helpful, and having those conversations. And then it's eye-opening, and you see a piece that you had only been making assumptions about before. Right. But
well, and it's so hard because that person, Will Yoder, is like one of the most infamous puppy brokers in the country. His company's name is on a lot of CVIs. He's been doing this since before I started bailing out Benji. Like, he should be my enemy. And for years, he and I were enemies on a piece of paper. But getting to know each other as humans and just talking things through helps me understand a little more about how his business might be different than somebody else's, or how, again, we're not a monolith. Like, just because you're a puppy broker doesn't mean you operate the exact same way as every other puppy broker in the space. Everything is that spectrum that we talk about. So I don't know. It feels weird saying that I wish we had leaned into that help earlier, because that help, quote unquote, is in the puppy mill space. But truly, like, Denise and Will could have saved animals earlier if we trusted other people to come in.
Yeah. And presumably they did what they could at the level that they could. Whereas if they had partners from other organizations, they could have done more, because they would have more capacity to get more dogs out.
Right. And there was, like, the scary thing was, the judge had said he is willing to surrender 150 dogs to an Indiana rescue. And immediately I'm like, what do you mean he's going to put 150 dogs in Indiana? We can take care of our dogs here. This is our state. Like, why? I looked at that rescue on paper. I thought that rescue was a sham rescue. I did a whole interview about it and how our dogs need to stay here. We need to make sure they're being taken care of. But those are specifically the dogs that I'm referencing when the Amish breeders were trying to get them out of Daniel Gingrich's place. He was going to surrender them, and Mindy Callison is like, no, don't trust them because of who they are.
I can see how it sounds like, if for the judge to say specifically he can surrender them to this rescue, makes it sound like, did Daniel Gingerich get to pick the rescue? Because that's shady. Like, what's his connection to that rescue? And
why does that rescue only have puppies available for adoption, and they're all over $1,000? Like, there were a lot of red flags from our perspective.
The statement that these dogs need to stay in Iowa and we can take care of them, is that just because of you didn't want them to go to that rescue because you had suspicions? Or what's the logic behind them staying in this state versus going out of state?
So on the local level, it was Bailing Out Benji and the Animal Rescue League of Iowa that were leading this charge. And so the ARL, this whole time, they're going to the federal court cases. They're going to some of these inspections, and they're trying to figure out when, how many. You know, they knew they were going to get the dogs. And so there's a whole shelter network, which we can get into, and not all of the dogs stayed in Iowa. But for me, it was so important to say, like, this court case is ongoing. It is happening here. The dogs need to stay here. Okay. Like, if you think about, like, evidence, why are we sending evidence to another state? And granted, not all of the dogs were audited. Not all of the dogs were a part of the court case, because he would have had so many more charges than he did. He wasn't even charged for all the dead dogs on his property, which I just find phenomenal. It's wild. But yeah, so I wasn't saying they have to stay in Iowa forever, but it was very much like, I think it was like June or July while this thing is going on, the dogs weren't saved until November. We really started talking about this in like February or March. So all of a sudden, midway through, only 150 dogs are going somewhere. And I'm like, why not thousands? Like, it was so many red flags. So I was like, why are you handpicking 150? Why are they going to a shady rescue in Indiana? Why do they have to go to Indiana? And again, now I know the rescue is attached to a vet. Like, there's a whole, we talk about unethical rescues now. It's a weird thing. But again, if we would have been able to at least communicate with those people, maybe I wouldn't have been such a stickler for like labels and not trusting, because there wasn't that open communication that I hope we're moving towards now.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it's those things you like learn, right? And you try to do better. And again, I don't regret our work on the Daniel Gingerich case, but now I know we do have allies that don't look like us. Maybe we can get dogs saved a little faster next time. And
and I know even before, and I don't know how much of this played into this case, but like when we started doing our field research and started opening the door to listen to Amish breeders, I know there was a lot of fear on your part about what's going to happen with me and my colleagues, and what's if I step out of this space. And so I'm sure that played a part at this time, where it's like, this is my lane and I have to stay in it. These are the talking points. This is the script. And now I dare say we're not as tied to that way of thinking.
Well, and that's a phenomenal point, because it also shows a different angle of what was happening. So when I say bailing out Benji and ARL, we were leading this. The ASPCA came in and donated like $50,000 or something. I'm not sure. They donated to the ARL to help. It might have been more than that. But they were here actively fundraising on social media saying, we're saving these dogs. We are doing this. They are putting sponsored posts in our state where our local people in the comments were like, wait, the ARL's got this. Wait, Bailing Out Benji is doing this. So it was a really interesting thing that we saw happen, because what these national groups are able to do in a case of like a seizure of 500 dogs, because that's on the day that the dogs were rescued, the big day, 513 dogs were pulled from his property. Again, small amounts were pulled a lot before. Many died, and we have no idea, other than the 300 that were auctioned off. No idea where the rest went. And so when there's a big raid, they are well prepped. They have the resources. They have the funding.
We're talking about like ASPCA level.
ASPCA, HSUS. Okay. When they come in to help with the puppy mill raid, they help build the cages. They help with like a station for the dogs to go. And then they are really good at documenting the cruelty side of it, because that's what they have people to do. Now, granted, ARL does a phenomenal job. They have a whole cruelty team that does these investigations that help get cases prosecuted. But these national groups also serve as that tool. We see that when you take a step back. So in cases like this too, on the local level, you'll only have one national group supporting you. You only have one national group helping you, because the other one can't because of politics. This group's involved, I can't be. And it's wild to me to see that on the big scale, while we're just trying to save dogs on the local scale. And these big groups have access to so much more funding than we do. And that's why our local people were getting really frustrated to see these sponsored posts on Facebook for weeks about this case, getting lots and lots and lots of donations, when this group, thank you for helping. Thank you for getting the dogs off the property. Thank you for giving a donation to the ARL. But you're actively, constantly still fundraising off of it. And it's like, why isn't that coming back to our state to help? Like, is that in an Iowa fund to help with future cases? The answer is no. And so that's why, I don't know, I'm kind of going off on a little bit of different tangent, but there were so many players involved in the Daniel Gingerich case. We were told to not trust a small snippet of them when everything else is proven. Maybe just take everybody with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
And really understand that there are a lot of agendas and narratives involved in these cases that you're not seeing as the person scrolling on Facebook.
Yeah.
But you always have to look deeper and think deeper.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. But anyway, to your other question, did the dog stay in Iowa? No. We saw dogs go to like Wisconsin Humane. They went to some places in Missouri. I think a few went to Minnesota. And so the ARL, because they're a part of like, this is a shelter thing. So we're not involved in this at all, but shelters join lists for like the HSUS, for Best Friends, and for ASPCA, and they become like transfer partners or shelter partners. And so if there's a big cruelty case in Missouri and a bunch of dogs are saved, some of those dogs might end up in Wisconsin because Wisconsin Humane has space. They're a part of this system, and now they get to help puppy mill dogs in Wisconsin, even though they came from Missouri. So all of the national groups have some kind of program like that. So once the ARL got the dogs, they were technically their property. They were all vetted, all checked out, and then transferred out. Typically, when shelters do that, not always, it is easier and faster to transfer out the younger, more healthy dogs. And then the ARL has I don't want to say the burden, but they have the task of rehabilitating the dogs that need it a little more and giving them a little more time that they need. The other side of this, though, because we're talking about all the drama, right? Rescues in our state and just locally, we're like, why aren't we helping? If there are 500 dogs in our state, Mindy, bailing out Benji did it. How can I help you? Can I take 10 dogs from you? Can I take 5 dogs from you? And we got a little bit of animosity, not just us, the ARL, because people were like, why can't we? We're here. Why can't we take dogs? Why can't we be shelter transfer partners? But in all reality, when you're dealing with 513 dogs, sending 50 to a shelter is easier than sending 5 to 10 rescues. Yeah. And we know rescues they run on foster homes. They don't have the space they need all the time. They have to scramble, and they could have done it. I have full faith in our rescue community that they could have rallied and helped. But that's the shelter mindset is, okay, if I'm looking at 500, I cannot work with 50 different groups. I have to work with 5 shelters who can each take a substantial amount. And so that was kind of another added piece of what was going on. So I don't know if people even understand all of that either. It can get really heated in these moments, and you need at least one calm head to try and explain it to everybody. And we were trying to be that role at the time, but I don't know, just a fascinating part of what was going on.
I have I'm sure our listeners will think this is a day one question. I have a day one question.
First of all, I hear from so many people who love your question because they are thinking it as I'm talking. They're like, what's Mindy? What's she going off on? So
the benefit for those kinds of listeners is my memory lasts 5 minutes. So you will have to tell me things 1,000 times. I'll ask the same question. So there's always a chance this is someone's first episode. And so then they're like, good, I'm glad she asked that question for the 1,000th time because I didn't hear it the first 999 times. Maybe it's an unfair question because I don't like to make assumptions about motives. And maybe that's not what this is. But is the perception that those national organizations see each other as competition, or not competition, but they're not interested in working together, or do they work together?
So that's a great question. I've been on many coalition calls with members of both teams, like the different national groups.
Okay.
But like federally, again, back to that the federal bills, they're not talking about each other's bills. They're not supporting each other's bills.
So instead of coming together to produce one legislation, we have
2 similar, they might have slightly different language, they might have different goals. We could be stronger together.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, everyone wants to say they did it. And so if the Puppy Protection Act passes, that's a federal bill, which would upgrade the Animal Welfare Act, which has not been upgraded since the 60s in any meaningful way. It would require that to be updated, cage size, all of it. But that is one organization's bill. And because they're the focus of it, when it wins, they get to put their logo on it and say they did it. So now this organization has to come up with their own bill and put their logo on it. And it's like, well, what are we supposed to do down here in the middle? And again, when you're scrolling on Facebook, you don't see that. You just see, oh, great, there are 2 bills. We need to support them. Couldn't we move a lot faster if we're all working on this together?
Yeah. And it makes me think of when you're talking about, back to Daniel Gingerich and the Indiana Rescue, or not the Indiana Rescue, like when Will Yoder was wanting to help and the veterinarian was wanting to help, and you are villainizing them with the mindset of, this is not the ideal solution I had scripted, so I cannot make room for it. Yeah. And it makes me think, when we talk about like the different legislation, it takes my mind to churches. Notoriously, there are so many denominations of churches in this country because they will have a disagreement. I think baptism can be done on infants. I think it has to be only on adults. We need to split. And like, so when I'm seeing this legislation, it's like, if one group is saying, here's what we think the cage size should be, and this group thinks it should be 6 inches bigger, they can't sign on to that legislation. Now they have to do their own legislation because they're not willing to come together and compromise to move it forward as one thing, and to allow that we see things differently, but we're still going to come together for the success of this program.
You just really explained like the rescue community, because anytime there's a rescue group, once there's a fight, now you've got 2 rescue groups.
Yeah.
Because they just split in half. Yeah. And then it becomes 5. And like, we are in that society where everyone thinks
Mindy,
they know best.
We have a unity problem in this country. I don't know if you've noticed.
Yeah, it's wild. And even like, again, we keep saying like our work with the Amish, like what we were trying to do by getting to know them and seeing some of the progress that's happening. These big organizations, that made them scared. We haven't really talked much about it publicly, but we need to. Like, we've been bullied hard by national groups. And it's not public. It's all quiet behind the scenes. It's in text messages and all of that. But they're scared because like our new way of trying to make change isn't their scripted way of doing it.
Right.
And they can't make room for the fact that we are just trying to say, hey, it's a good thing that not all of these Amish breeders are hurting their dogs. The stereotype is that if you're an Amish dog breeder, you are a puppy mill. You are torturing that dog. That dog needs saved no matter what. We don't believe that. We are trying really hard to change it. And somehow that has disrupted this national narrative and has made some of these people that I've known my entire career as Bailing Out Benji call me untrustworthy and think that I'm the enemy, because my God, Mindy can't be trusted if she's talking to someone like Will, where we're just trying to find a future where there's more unity. Because look at what's happening in our country. Everyone is fighting. You can't find a friend anymore, right? Like, it's just, well, if you're wearing that color shirt, I hate that color and I can never talk to you anymore. And it's like, that color is funny because I didn't mean it that way. But like, you know, it's like, you're team A, you can't be team H. Sorry.
Yeah. And we've seen, by opening that line of communication, not just Bailing Out Minji, but other rescues and groups and people who have opened that door to communication. Not only is it giving us insight into a world we've only been able to imagine from looking at inspection records, we actually get to see into that world and build that trust and hear stories from their perspective. So from Will talking about Daniel Gingerich and his perspective helps us to learn, but also we have seen that our influence in coming into those spaces is helping to change how the breeding is happening. So it's a beneficial on both sides.
But it's benefiting the dogs. Like, Bailing Out Benji gets nothing out of this. We spend money going to these communities, to stay in hotels, to travel there, to go and see what's going on. Much to the bane of your existence, I know. But like, we are not getting anything in return. Like, there's not a return on this investment for us to go and learn besides the real stuff we are learning and seeing firsthand.
Yeah.
We love it. Like, it's just we're planning another trip to Indiana soon to try to bring some of our volunteers into this so they can see it too. And I'm never going to apologize for wanting to be someone who craves knowledge and education. And if I have to go to, quote unquote, the other side to see what the other side even looks like, we need to do more of that. We need to do more reaching across the aisle, whatever that aisle means to you. So, it's fascinating. It's been a weird year and a half of our lives. But it's just that perspective. And I think if we can acknowledge that maybe we didn't handle that case the best 4 years ago with the information we had at the time, we thought we were.
Yeah.
Now, knowing what we know, I wish we could have handled that differently. I think dogs could have been saved a lot faster. And it's not on me. I can't carry that on my heart or like our organization. It's not our fault. it was Daniel Gingrich's fault for how he took care of those animals and all of the people in his life that enabled that.
And will inform the next time.
Mhm.
I mean, God forbid there's a next time that something as egregious as that. But everything we know and see tells us that somewhere out there probably is a situation similar to that. So,
and there are so many cases we don't see that don't make the news. There is a broker that I adjacently have been speaking to in Missouri. He and I, as people, we get along really well, which is going to make other people mad to say, like, oh, I can sit down and talk football with this man and we can have a great time as people. We just happen to have very different businesses that we operate. I've heard from him about, like, when there's a problematic breeder in his community, how he will step in and get those dogs out, pay that breeder to go away, whatever that looks like on his end. So there's a lot of those little things happening that we are not privy to. And I'm not going to be an apologist for that industry. There's a lot that needs to change with commercial dog breeding. But I do think there are small little pieces of hope that show us that there are people on that side who hate puppy mills as much as we do. And it doesn't look like what we look at and what we think that work looks like, but they're trying.
Yeah.
In their own way. So we have to make space for it, even though it's yucky and it feels gross. But we have more allies in this space, I think, than we've ever wanted to admit before.
Yeah, and having those connections and those relationships, even though, like you say, you two are in very different worlds, seeing the issue differently, but the fact that you can have that relationship is going to have an impact on the work that they're doing, just like it's had an impact on the work that we're doing. So it's not for nothing.
No. And I mean, what do we get from having conversation? What do we get out of learning from each other? That's it. Yeah. And even if you don't, like, some people, again, think that we've been fooled or people lied to us, like, okay, fine. But at least, like, that's more information for us. Like, if I know someone's lying to me, I'm going to still let them lie to me, hear everything they have to say, and then just mark that in my head as, okay, they're not trustworthy. Like, you can still have conversations with people and know what their agenda is and know what their intentions are. And that's very real in our space too. Yeah. So when I'm having conversations with brokers, breeders, whatever that looks like, I sometimes have as much distrust of them as I do with my own colleagues in this space. I can't trust some of the colleagues that I've known for 14 years either. So it's like, we're in a weird spot where we're just acknowledging everyone's gross. Everyone has the capacity to be gross. It doesn't matter what quote unquote side you're on.
Yeah. And important to remember that it's not just conversations that you're having. Right. You are going to places and seeing with your own eyes, not my eyes, who I don't know what to look for. I don't know historically, here's some of the things that happen that just somebody off the street may not even notice or think is a problem. This is you who has devoted a large chunk of your life to doing this.
Almost half of my life at this point.
I was going to say that, and then I was like, that sounds
very weird. I've spent almost half of my life working on specifically puppy mill issues.
Yeah. So not for nothing. It's not like, oh, they're being deceived by what they're being told by these breeders and brokers. Like, so you're taking what you're being told and you're saying, bet, I'm coming. Like, let me come see. And they're like, come see. And you go, and you've been several times to different places now. Some have been better than others, like totally transparent about that.
But Daniel Gingerich, still around. I mean, he moved to Ohio. He moved back with his dad. His dad is in the horse business. Something else that happened, and this is, I'm going to go on a little rant about online and monitoring online. His dad, shortly after all of this, was found selling puppies on like puppies.com or Lancaster Puppies, like something like that. He was selling puppies on their website without a license. USDA got called. The weird thing is they set up this whole sting operation, which I've never known the USDA to do. But an inspector called, pretended to buy a puppy, showed up. Guess what? You don't have a license. Now you're going to get in trouble. He was like, get off my property. I want nothing to do with the federal government. I will never have a license. And his dad kicked everybody off the property. And the theory is that he is not breeding those dogs anymore either. But I think that family is just like, we don't want to deal with it. We don't want a license. We don't want to sell dogs. If you're going to require me to breed with a license, I don't want a part of it. We haven't seen them popping up selling in either way, like either dad or son. But it was just kind of an interesting part of it. Like him just popping up out of nowhere with a breeder profile online is concerning.
Was it out of nowhere, or was it after Daniel moved back?
It was after Daniel moved back.
Because was it Daniel?
So see, that's the other thing. Like, we're monitoring CVIs. That's what I do. Like, we noticed that as he was getting ready to shut down and be done forever, dogs were going to Ohio and to his relatives, to other places. So that's when complaints were getting filed, and that's when the USDA was following up with it. So yeah. And some of the locations that I will say, he operated illegally. A lot of those, I don't want to say a lot, some of those places were approached by the Iowa Department of Ag and said, okay, but do you want a license? Do you want, like, your setup, isn't bad. Not all of the places were treating the animals cruel and inhumane. And I want to say, like, when Daniel was dropping dogs off, he wasn't educating them. So he was just giving a bunch of dogs to 2 people and saying, okay, breed these dogs. They're not dog breeders. Like,
so at all of these different facilities, it was all under his license, but they're being run by other people.
Yeah. And some people had the dogs in their basement. Some people had their dogs in kennels outside. Like, he was just finding people to throw dogs at so he could take those puppies and sell them, essentially. And so the Iowa Department of Agriculture, after getting as much of the information as they could, and again, there are probably so many places we never knew about, they were able to say, do you want a license? Do you want to go through the process? Do you want to learn? And so there are a few places that got either a USDA or state license after that. And so now they're operating with a clean history. Like, they don't have Daniel's like attachment to them, but they are still in operation in some way. But now they're under regulation, which is what we work on anyway. We file complaints to bring breeders into regulation all the time, because how do you know what's out there if people aren't inspecting them?
Right.
So, but yeah, that was a lot.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions? Like,
I don't. I mean, like I said, none that can be answered satisfactorily. I mean, it to me, it just reemphasizes the public knowledge piece of it, and the more people know and the more people understand, so that they're not making assumptions that, a particular license means this is a good breeder, or a particular endorsement means that they're a good breeder. It just, every conversation we have, it just gets harder and harder for the common person to avoid making those bad choices.
That's why the national groups are grumpy a little bit. It's because we've made this conversation icky. Before, it was clean. Don't buy a dog in a pet store. Don't buy online. You won't support puppy mills that way. That's what they think. You cannot support a puppy mill if you are avoiding online and if you are avoiding buying in a pet store.
I mean, it's don't buy a dog. Like, that's it's easy, but people still were. Right. So it's not effective.
That's it. Like, we want people, if they're going to buy, we want them to do their research. We want them to look into it. And that is something we've always said. A lot of people equate it to like buying a new TV or buying a washer and dryer. You're Googling that. You're reading reviews. Very few people just buy an appliance and bring it into their home. Yeah. But something about this beautiful little puppy makes an adult human,
telling you the puppies
lose
are the
their
problem.
Mind.
The puppies are the problem. It's their eyes. It's the whole reason puppy mills exist, because the puppies are so cute.
And the pet stores like to say, well, we can't, the industry likes to say, well, you can't sell a product if it's sick. Like, yes, you can. A little baby puppy at 8 weeks old is not going to show you a whole history of health. Like, you've got a future ahead of you and genetic issues that are going to pop up. So yeah, you can absolutely sell an 8-week-old puppy that's sick and no one would have any idea. So that's kind of a tagline that they use, a little line, but
yeah. So I want to circle back and close us out with a little bit of a fundraising push, because you mentioned earlier that, like, we don't make money off of this work. There's no income for us in filing complaints. There's no income in
performing the Colorado audit for the state.
Performing an audit for the state to inform legislators as they're trying to make change, or for helping Animal Rescue League bring charges against someone and get animals out. We get nothing from that. We've developed our search engine to help people search for breeders, search for brokers, make sure that they are vetting the people that they're about to give their money to make sure that they're not supporting puppy mills, to try to like divert some of that money that makes this business so lucrative. We just posted on the week that we're recording this, so obviously it's now in the past. We just posted that our search engine, in the 4 months it has been live, almost 500,000 people have performed
searches. Yes.
500,000 searches have been done on that search engine. That's huge. And we shared that on social media, and everyone, like, it has gotten so much attention, so many shares, so much love from consumers, from animal advocates, from larger groups saying this is phenomenal. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We've not gotten a single donation in from that, which is not like, wow, poor us. I'm just saying, this is not income generating for us.
No, and we put it out for free.
Yes,
we don't
charge for the search engine, which we could. I said when I first started, I'm like, you could pay for that. You could put that behind a paywall and people could subscribe and other advocacy groups could use it as a tool. We are not going to do that. We're going to offer it for free because our mission is to change this industry. Our mission is not to make money off of it.
Right.
And so that's great. But we also do need money to keep doing it. So that's just my fundraising pitch I'm going to put out there. We have a lot of small donors who believe in us and trust us and are our biggest cheerleaders, and we love them. But we have a lot of other cheerleaders who aren't giving, right? And it's and that's just what I want to put out into the universe, is that there is no way for us to make money from this. Even grants are extremely hard for us to get because we cannot tell you how many dogs we're keeping out of shelters. We can't tell you how many dogs we kept from being euthanized this year. We don't have those metrics. That's not what we do.
We can make up metrics. Everybody else does.
But I can't.
Right. We won't.
We won't. So that's just what I want to throw out to the universe of our supporters, is that there is no way with our model of the work that we do, there's no way for us to make money off of it, which isn't why we're here, but also all of this takes money. So we have to come up with something to do that. So that's why we really value the donations. We do not take it lightly. We celebrate everyone that comes in. So yeah, just wanted to throw that fundraising pitch out there because we haven't done a real good solid fundraising pitch in a while. But yeah.
Can you imagine if we got $1 for every time someone searched? Can you imagine if people were like, hey, I use your search engine, I'm going to send you a $5 donation? Like, something that simple would have changed our lives.
$1 per search in the last 4 months is more than our entire annual revenue. So yeah.
And it's like, clearly that's a valuable tool. People are using it. Other organizations are using it. Like,
and we want them to use it to help change this industry. We don't want them to use it so that we make money. We want the industry to change. That's why we're here. And that's why we'll keep doing the work we're doing until there are no more puppy mills.